Hi, it's Jonathan, and I want to thank Lisa for joining me for this conversation about the Be Your Own Healer program. It's been maybe 6 months or 5 months, something like that.
I'd say closer to like 6 or 7.
Great, that's awesome. All right, so why don't you just start by telling us where you were before you joined?
Before I joined. So about a year ago from today, but probably 2.5 months before I joined the program, I had back surgery and I had a discectomy in the L5-S1 disc. And I was I was still recovering from that, but I don't think I knew what recovery was supposed to look like. I was still in bed a lot. I was exhausted. Whenever I was up and about, like I couldn't be up and about very much. And I was still experiencing a fair amount of pain. Like it felt like the saying that people were telling me, which is once you have your first back surgery, you're bound to have more, was like already starting to become true, right? So I was definitely in a space of how do I prevent that and how do I prove all these people wrong, because I didn't I didn't want to go through this again. Um, let's see.
That's
So
such a terrible idea. The idea of once you have one, you're going to have more. Not that it's not sort of possibly true, but what a terrible image.
yeah, and a lot of the couple surgeons I talked to and doctors I talked to basically said, well, your spine is probably bad enough that will need to be fused one day, but you're too young that we don't want to fuse it right now, because then that'll just lead to problems up and above and below the fusion. Right. So I was definitely in a space of at 46 feeling like uh life was over in a sense, like it was only downhill from there. So luckily, well, and the injury that put me in bed and got me to surgery happened. It happened in November. I had surgery in March, and I think I joined your program in like July or August or something. Right. So during the months that I was in bed waiting on surgery, I was slowly starting to listen to some of your workshops
Right.
and just start learning about the body and how things could be done differently. I'm a big fan of doing things differently and doing things against the common popular methods.
Right.
So I was already starting to listen to those workshops once in a while. And I heard your story about after your third knee surgery, somebody asked you, what are you going to do so that you don't have a fourth? and like hearing your story helped me realize that you could change things, right? There was that possibility at least. So that's kind of where I was when I joined. And I think I had just started. I don't even know if I was doing the yoga classes yet. Like I maybe logged into them, but laid on the floor for most of the time.
Right.
Because it was too much effort for me.
Yeah, I remember like right in the beginning, your frustration was just you just wanted to go for a walk or a hike and did not find you couldn't do that.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I live in Boulder, so I have mountains right there. I would a couple times a week pop up onto one of the mountains and go for a hike with my dog. And uh yeah, doing even those things were I was getting there, like because I was a couple months after surgery, so I was getting outside. Um, but I think I remember talking to you like at the 40-minute mark, I was done. Like everything started seizing up again. I was exhausted. Um, so that was, when we talk about sort of what were my expectations for the program, they were pretty low. I mean, honestly, it was like, I just want to go for a hike and not get totally worn out at 40-minute mark. And it's not just worn out. Like I said, things would seize up and I would be in a lot of pain again. Like the first 40 minutes felt decent. But I was clearly doing something that was causing things to seize up. Right. So that was really my expectation, was to learn how to hike again without that happening.
You know, I remember that because you reminded me of that 40-minute mark. I think one of the first things we said is, all right, let's just go out 20 and back 20 so that you don't get to the place at 40 where what do I do now and how do I get home?
Yeah, I would say that's actually one of the things I learned from you, which I wasn't able to figure out myself, which was the idea of not overdoing it and not pushing too hard and actually relaxing before anything.
Mhm.
And it really, I think once I had your permission to do it and instruction, then I was like, it took a bit, but I was like, all right, I'm going to try it this way. And once I started just giving myself permission to do nothing but rest, instead of feeling like I had to push myself harder, things really started to shift, which was interesting.
That's great. Yeah, no, I am on about less is more until it can be more is more.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think
where,
we're always trying to push beyond what we need to do. Like we might like to do more, but we don't necessarily need to do more.
well, it's interesting in terms of this program. I don't know if it's 50-50, but there are people where it's like you have to move, like you have to get up and move. And then there are other people of like you have to slow down before you're going to be able to move again. And that figuring that out, how to help people with that is just a really interesting dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
where would you say, like, would you going for a 40-minute walk today, how would that go?
It would be fine. I mean, I would prefer actually probably to do a hike. I told you I did as opposed to just walking like around the neighborhood.
Totally, yeah.
That's just not as fun for me. But a couple weekends ago, I went up to a friend's property and we went snowshoeing with them. And it was really funny because I put myself out front because my son was in behind. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to let my husband deal with him. And then we had the friend that went with us. He was with me and he goes, man, you're going really fast.
That's great.
And I was like, really? And so at some point he and I switched and he was in the lead and I was following him and I was like, wow, I was going really fast because this is a decent pace, but it wasn't, so I was checking in with myself and I was like, oh, I'm not in pain. Like I actually feel like have a good posture through all this movement. And yeah, it was like the first time I realized I could do more because I was just naturally going faster than anyone else in the group.
That's
With
so awesome. Do
yeah.
you find yourself hesitating still, or do you feel like, wow, I can pretty much do whatever I want?
I do still hesitate. But and you and I have talked about this, like for a while I had a bit of fear, going back to old activities because I just didn't, working with you, you gave me exercises, we do the yoga. And so I feel really safe in that environment.
Right.
Then when I started to try adding other activities, I was like, just very fearful that I wouldn't be so conscious of the movements I was making and that something would, because, I mean, so many back problems happen when you're doing the most mundane of activities. I mean, my very first one was just running around in the backyard with my dog. And so I have still had some reluctance to pick up other activities, but it hasn't necessarily stopped me. I've just kind of checked in and said, all right, well, how can I make this how can I do this activity where I feel safe and like I'm being conscious of my movements instead of just jumping back in, And so, and like I told you, I sometimes take high intensive exercises and then I slow them down, go really slow and just focus on keeping my spine in the position I want it to be. Because I would say I haven't fully developed like the automatic posture.
Yeah.
I still have to correct myself a fair amount, but but I do notice it's getting more automatic. Like I don't have to think quite as much.
For what it's worth, I'm still correcting myself 20 years later.
Yeah.
You've been really diligent about the yoga classes, which is, I do find that the people who take advantage of the resources definitely get the most out of it. And you've shown up, and it's like every instruction is the same thing. So I think when you hear it in many different ways, it's really beneficial.
It really is helpful. And even like the workshops, because I know you do like a cycle of them. And so you're starting to go back to some of the ones that I heard first. And I'm like, well, but you hear things, either you need to hear them again to, remember, or you hear things totally differently. And it's a new aha, right? And so I'm trying to remember, just recently I had an aha that I was like, part of you feels like dumb or bad that you didn't hear it the first time and heed the advice the first time. But it's like, I kind of believe that I wasn't supposed to, or like it wouldn't have done any good at that point. Like my body wasn't ready. So now I hear it, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to try that now and see how that goes. And then I feel like these mini leaps forward. But yeah, I think I just, when I signed up, I just said, I put everything on the schedule and said, this is what I'm doing. Right. And it's like I took the decision out of it and just put on the schedule, and I show up. And there are definitely days when things come up and it's just too stressful to try to manage it. But yeah, I try to show up to both yoga classes. I try to show up to all the workshops and do the work. Like I noticed when I was first doing the yoga classes, I wasn't on camera, partially because I couldn't actually get through a full workout, right? I was on the mat half the time, just laying there and relaxing. But at some point I was like, to go to the next level, I started turning the camera on, because it's a little bit more accountability of not being distracted during the class or not walking away, or I know that you can see what we're doing. And so you give feedback or you give instruction based on who's there and who's on camera. So
yeah, it's funny because I don't use names in the classes, but I'm always teaching to whoever's on camera, which makes my life easier. And on an interesting note, when we met, you weren't working, and now I'm not going to say it's good, but you're working maybe too much, but not suffering for it. Is that true?
Yeah. I did want to bring that up. So yeah, when I first started the program, I was barely working like 10 hours a week, and I was doing a lot of it from bed. So it was like all I could manage. And then, yeah, I'd say a month or two after starting the program, I had a client call me up with an opportunity for me to work for them nearly full time. And it definitely, like, we saw together the progression of me having to build up the stamina to be able to do it. Right. Because when I first started working more hours, I was just exhausted. Like I could do nothing else in life but work and rest. That was it.
Right.
But then after, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks, I just got up and started doing more stuff around the house. And right, it was like, because I allowed it, right? I didn't push myself. And yes, now, so I'm a bookkeeper. And so, January and February are really busy months. And I ended up working like 50 hour. I had a couple 50-hour weeks, billable time, which, sometimes you're working even more than that. but not billing. And it was too much, but like you said, I wasn't suffering. I was sticking to my, I wouldn't call it a routine, but I prioritized the resting, right? So it's like I worked a lot of hours, but then I was resting a lot to help recover from it as quickly as possible. And now I'm back to like 35, 40 hours, which feels a lot better. And I have a little more space in my life now. So now I am starting to look at what other activities can I start doing.
Right.
And so, and what's great, I want to say is that, you know, when you start to do something new, then I can experience like new pains or new whatevers, and having the ability to be able to talk to you about them and get your perspective and perception on either what's going on or what maybe I need to back up and do first, or, you know, like build up these muscles by doing these exercises because they're really tired or something, you know, for example. So that's, I think, been really a benefit, is that I'm more willing to take on more stuff and new stuff because I know I have your support to talk to you about it. And if anything comes up, and I don't know if you want to talk about the SI going out.
No, I totally do. Like, that's such an interesting thing for me, because like you had a moment where I woke up and I got an email and it was like, you know, five alarm fire. So what had happened in that moment?
It was actually, I was sitting in a chair and I didn't turn my whole body to stand up, right? I put the leg out and kind of stood up, and I felt the same pop that I felt, a similar pop as to when I very first started my whole back problem journey with my dog in the backyard.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, well, I just need to rest, relax, and, you know, but after several hours, it just kept seizing and getting more and more painful. And so I sent you an email. I was like, I don't know if you have time to talk, but this is going on and I can't move. Like I'm like, it's painful to stand. I can't hardly move. So I'm on the floor. So yes, you got on a call with me and basically just talked to me while I did a bunch of the relaxation exercises or movements, and you know, said, all right, keep doing those and I didn't, like, I thought it was a disc problem again, right? And you shared your experience of, oh, well, I once had this thing happen where my SI joint just like popped out of track. And I was like, all right, I'll consider that too, right? That could be the issue. And I think it was like we talked on a Monday morning, and by Monday night, I had been in constructive rest position. And I was just laying there and I just took my hips and just kind of did that like shearing motion just as a test. And then I just felt pop and it went, and I was like, it just went back into track. But then I was in still like very exhausted. My muscles were very, very sore, you know, so we kept in communication, and you were just kind of, it's just kind of nice to know what's coming, you know, like, oh, your body just went through this mini trauma and it's going to be sore and it's going to act like you got beat up. And so when I felt all that, I wasn't surprised, and I just kind of let it run its course. And by like 3 days later, you would have never known that it happened. So
Great, because, you know, it's not that it's all a mystery to me, but it's all still a mystery to me. And when that happened to me, it was before I was teaching people to walk. And I remember telling you, like, well, it took me 3 weeks before my sacrum popped back in. And I was like, well, it might take that long. And I was so psyched, like that night, to get an email going, it's back in. And I have to say, you know, I didn't see that coming. So that, I love that, you know, it's so great.
Yeah. But the other valuable thing out of that whole experience was, it, I had been living in fear of other things going wrong, like of the something popping or whatever. And I think going through that with you helped me realize, like, you can't prevent it from ever happening again. Like, there's no guarantee that you can get yourself to that point, but you now have the experience of your body can deal with it, right? And you can deal with it mentally, and you can get through it a lot faster than you did before, and obviously not go to surgery and all that. So that gave me a lot of confidence, I guess, to just try to live more normally and not feel like I was having to be super protective of my body. And so that was a great experience in the end, even though it was
Right. Isn't that wild? Like, you get positives from the negative. My thing is hypermobility and my 3 knee surgeries, and I'm crazy active and I'm always injured. I'm always dealing with something, but I feel like these many years later, I just don't worry anymore because I feel like I know I'm going to heal. It might take a while, but if you have the tools, you always know you can get back on track.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the key, is the tools, which I think that's the other thing is that, how do I want to say this? But basically, like, the way I felt is like, you're teaching things that nobody else teaches, and you see things in. So after my surgery, I was given a physical therapist, right? And I actually only went one time because the very first thing he said to me was, looking at my chart, he's like, "Oh, well, I see you've been prescribed physical therapy before. How come you didn't finish that?" So it was like berating me for not doing physical therapy. And in my head, I'm like, well, because it doesn't actually do anything. Like, it makes me do these exercises that are super painful, and like, you say they're going to help, but they don't seem to help. Right? I ended up having to have back surgery, even though I've been doing Pilates for years, other back treatments for years, massage therapy for years. And guess what? I still ended up on the surgeon's table. And so I'm like, that doesn't make, again, I can look at the silver lining is that led me to working with you. And now I'm learning about my own body and not what other people are saying to do. Right. And I've been very reluctant to go back to like public yoga classes because I've done enough of those. I haven't done a ton, but I've done enough where I think they're going to try to force me into a position that doesn't work for my spine,
Right.
And that's the thing that you do, is you don't tell us what to do or how to do it. You have us explore for ourselves, and you say,
Right.
Try this and check out if the left side's stronger than the right side, and it really gets me to observe things differently and not be so upset or stuff like that. So that's what I really appreciate, is that you're not acting like an expert who has all the answers that a lot of these guys. I've never heard a physical therapist say, well, this may or may not work. Like,
Right.
they
Right.
say, do this and it will strengthen this and it will make this better. But it
So
doesn't.
interesting. Yeah.
So.
No, and we've talked about how I've said, I think you should go to yoga. You should go check it out, in the sense that I do think you now have the tools to do your own practice within the room. And I always say, like, you got to be respectful to teachers and do what they say with a measure of it. And you can always say, don't touch me, but that's another, I think, another leap for you to make, right? When you'll go to a yoga class and maybe you'll walk out and go, oh, that wasn't so bad. I can do this more. So that's exciting in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. I think that's awesome. I can't thank you enough for having this conversation. It's been, everyone I work with, it's a journey, and it always makes me so happy when it works. And, you know, sometimes it doesn't, but for the most part, it does. And I really look forward to seeing just where you continue to go to. So thank you so much for having this conversation, Lisa. I really appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome.
Have a great day.
You too.